This might take a while.
May tomorrow be sunny and bright, and good night.
WTNDLP Macomb.
All right, we will have the opening. It's not Pat's opening, but it's an opening. So that's a good thing. And we'll do that in just a moment. As soon as the darn monitor switches over to the other computer, it would be nice if
Introducing that world famous Tom! And that magnificent Daryl.
Lots to sing, everything's gonna swing, so get ready, here we go. Big or small, short or tall, you will all have a ball on the Tom and
Daryl.
This is WTNDLP Macomb,
WQNA DB Springfield.
RFD, and KWQQ Farmington.
Yes, indeed, and this is the 18th of October for 2024.
Right, we've got one more show before the end of October, I think.
Maybe two.
Maybe two. I guess there'll be two. All right, whatever.
Well, actually, we think the first day of November will be a Friday, so
Yeah.
we might not.
Well, obviously we won't have two
Right.
more.
We won't, it'll be, I guess, next week is it.
That's right. Well, we'll be doing some Halloween stuff on each of the shows from tonight and next week too. Maybe even we'll do some on the first as well. We'll see what happens.
I'd also like to make mention of, I just found out today that apparently Keith LaMonica passed away, and many people won't know who he is, but he was the first person to try what became programming for a satellite dish owner.
That's right.
Basically, he started out doing what he called FM America, where he was just playing music on the satellite, and it had a banner that said FM America on the front on the screen. And he was in Salt Lake City, Utah at the time, and he was living across from an uplink site, and they buried the cables across the street.
Underneath the street. Basically, they put in a whole new section of the street and put his cabling from one side of the thing to the other, and got his studio set up.
Yep.
And he had live connectivity with full frequency response.
Right. 6.8 audio.
Right, in the main channel of the audio for video stations.
Mm-hmm.
And there were other things on other frequencies.
Right. They had a whole lot of stuff on that bird on audio, on lower other audio frequencies, but his was a very prominent one. And this was, I believe,
And
in 1984, I think.
at one point, he had 2 channels because he had stereo. He had 6.8 and 6.2.
That's true.
So he had left and right channels available.
Mhm.
And
He started out just doing music, and then people started calling up and talking to him, and he got the idea that maybe there was stuff going on, like this problem with the dish owner maybe going to lose their signals. So
because everybody was, all the other the main providers were planning on scrambling if they hadn't scrambled
right,
already.
they hadn't scrambled yet. A few of them-
86 they
Right.
scrambled.
The whatchamacallit, Canada had scrambled the Oak system, the Oak Orion, so some of their stuff was scrambled, but they hadn't decided on the system, or it wasn't ready yet to scramble the American stuff, which was going to use the
Video cipher.
video cipher. And originally they had no plans on serving the dish owner. They were just going to block it out. And so anyway, he got a huge number of people listening. I never got a complete count, but I used to listen back then. And we started listening, I think, for earnest about 1985. And he would get thousands of calls and had probably hundreds of thousands of listeners. I mean, he had to have had that many because he had a whole bunch of phone lines, and they were always busy.
Right.
You had to wait for maybe a half hour to get a call in, maybe longer, for him to pick it up. And he had about 20 lines, something like that, for a while. I mean, it slowly grew, but it was very significant. And nothing after it was quite as big. Chuck Dawson showed up on FM America and talked, and eventually started his own channel, and he did pretty well. That was, I think, 87.
He did. He came in up with KSAT,
That's right.
and later on they sort of his channel sort of went away and they got replaced by CSAT.
Right. Was a one on the east.
Right.
So yeah, it took a while for he eventually gave it up, and but
Well, LaMonica
he did
eventually
give it
gave
up for a while and then came back.
LaMonica gave it up, and basically just sort of semi-retired, at least from his show, and then he did come back and do more shows. He ended up having to get a different channel, I think, as the channel that he was on sort of left, didn't have any room anymore for him.
Right. Yeah, I don't know all the details of why that happened. I didn't really check into it, but I think it was probably that it was worth a lot of money because, after all, it was the main channel for that satellite, or at least for that particular frequency. That channel number he was on, obviously having a 6.8 and 6.2 was not going to be cheap.
Right, and obviously the fact that he could that anybody who had video to be used, the video would get those 2 channels.
That's right.
That was the audio that was standard for a video
Right.
service.
So if you were on another if there was other audio, which there often was, you had to have a tunable receiver, not all of which were capable of tuning.
Right. The original receivers most of them only had the 6.8, and they were not tunable. Eventually you could get like cards or whatever, make it have 6.8 and 6 for any individual frequency you wanted, really. Mm-hmm. But the 2 main channels were 6.2 and 6.8.
Right. Those were the standard broadcast channels in effect.
Right.
And there were fairly early on receivers. We bought one right around 1980, which was capable of tuning. It was the what was it, Ramsey? Not Ramsey. What was it?
I think it was Ramsey.
It could have been. It was trying to think what they called it at the moment, but it was from a ham company, and they built a fairly inexpensive satellite receiver. And
Fairly crappy one, too.
What's that?
The original one, the first one we had very narrow tuning.
Yes, it
So
was great for audio.
It was great for a lot of the audio channels that were in narrow band. But it didn't do very well with wideband because wideband was over modulating it. So
Right. But then the
there was replacement.
A lot of services, you couldn't pick up the narrow ones if you had a wideband receiver, and a lot did. I can't remember, but I don't think there was ever a variable bandwidth.
No,
tuning
there were some
got one or the other.
there were some compromises that were about halfway between the wideband and the narrowband, but they didn't do a good job. Those didn't do a good enough job on the narrowband because they were too wide, and they didn't really do a good enough job on the wideband because they were too narrow for that.
You ended up, in some cases, you couldn't hear anything. Some of the ANIC channels were very, very narrow.
That's right.
And they couldn't be tuned
Well,
in.
WGN TV, the channel that carried WGN TV had a huge number of channels on it.
Right.
Some were stereo and some were mono, and they were all very narrow band.
Yep.
And they had a audio. They changed the audio. It was compressed. It was very compressed, in fact, and you had to have something to decompress it to get a decent audio signal from it.
Yep.
Anyway, it wasn't very good.
No, that was an amazing system. That was almost like a Dolby. In fact, you could use some sort of Dolby box to kind of improve it. They had commercial ones, but they were real expensive.
You need to get closer to your mic.
Okay. Anyway, they had some commercial boxes that were really expensive that the people at Uplinks used to get the better quality.
Right.
But for the average person, the best you could do was something like a Dolby or a, some
DBX maybe.
compression thing, DBX, yeah. In any case, they could help make it better. But I can't remember all of the details. I do know that we did a satellite. We had a satellite seminar in I think it was 1986, 87, somewhere in through there. Might have been 86 because it was pretty early, I think.
It was before everything had scrambled, in fact, whatever
Right.
it was. So
And we managed to get about 100 people to show up and we had our senator there.
that's
and
right.
He spoke on the issue, and we gathered a good chunk of those people through LaMonica's channel at the time, and yet they were all within 100 miles or 200 miles of here, probably more like 100.
There's one thing I want to point out that of all of the people they called us dish heads. Those of us who were dish heads were a very, very compatible in our love of satellite and everything. But we were all over the place in terms of political issues.
Right.
So you had, and one of the chief backers of our satellite, whatever you want to call it, issues, was amazingly what's his name? The
I
guy
know
that
who you mean, and I'm trying to.
yeah,
think of
he ran for president and
He
had
was the guy that ran for president against, who was it? Was it Kennedy?
no, it wasn't Kennedy. I don't think it was Kennedy anyway. Oh, anyway, he was a senator.
Yep.
And I'm trying to remember his name.
He was a ham, I think
He was a ham. Yes, he was, and he was very much in favor of things for hams, and he was a big supporter of satellite dishes.
Yes,
just
indeed.
totally amazingly so.
Yep.
And
He was the one that had the,
yeah, it was Kennedy, because I think who was he running against?
I think it was.
It might have
been
it might no, I don't think it was Kennedy. It was
Maybe Johnson.
Johnson. Yeah, he was running against Johnson, and they ran a commercial saying that he would bomb. He would set off an atomic war,
Right.
and obviously that was stupid. But
Right. Yep.
And I can't think of his name for the life
I
of me.
can't at the moment either.
I think we're losing our minds. Anyway, we're here.
Yes.
And I never really thought I would have we would have a discussion about Keith LaMonica.
Yeah, I didn't know if or when we would, but we obviously have to
Yeah.
at this point because
And I don't have.
a
Well,
significant
I'm trying to remember. I will at some point play his theme song.
I was thinking of that because he had 2 or 3 of them.
Well, I know the one I was thinking of was a fifth of Beethoven.
Right, that was a big one for him. One of the others was Memories,
Oh yeah.
and trying to remember what the other one was, but I think he had about 3 of them that he would often play. But I think the Fifth of Beethoven was very common. That's how we tended to start the show.
Right. And I'll get to that at some point or another.
Okay.
But
He was a ham operator also,
yes, he was.
and a controversial thing. He apparently had a bit of a drinking problem,
Yes, he did.
and I can remember that people used to count. They could hear as he was opening beer cans, and they would count how many they heard in a particular show.
Right. They were keeping track of it.
Yep.
It was funny.
Yep.
He was an interesting person.
Definite.
I did not have a lot of well, let's just say I didn't trust him very much.
No, I think that was the big problem. Is he was pretty much hoping to be successful, and unfortunately, he, like almost everybody else in that industry, he had some luck getting things accomplished, but he wasn't really.
He wasn't a very good. His coping skills with money were not that good.
No.
Let's
In
just-
fact, there was some talk about him spending on things that he shouldn't have spent.